Hi, my name is Danni Quintos, and I am a writer and poet. And today we're going to do some writing exercises. We're going to read a couple poems, and we're going to talk about poetry a little bit. So, the first thing that I always like to talk about when introducing poetry, especially to new writers, is details. My best advice for any writer is to add specific, concrete, luminous detail. Be observant. Look for the unusual, the strange, the stuff that sticks to your memory. Now, when I say concrete, that means specific things that you can touch, you can see with your eyes, you can smell, you can hear, or you can taste. Writing about food, writing about colors and shapes, all of that is going to be more specific and more detailed. And that is the kind of things in writing that will really stick to memory, and they will make an impact, and they'll make your writing strong. So let's talk a little bit about a certain kind of poem called a persona poem. A persona poem is a poem in the voice of someone other than the poet. So a lot of times when you read a poem, you might think this poem is written from the point of view of the person who wrote it. But a persona poem is not. It is written in the voice of somebody else. This could be a person, an animal, an inanimate object, or an abstract concept like love or humor or fear, right? Think of a persona as a character. Imagine what your toothbrush might say if it could talk. Your favorite stuffed animal from childhood, what would that animal say? Maybe a character from a book that you love, or an historical figure. All of those, writing in the voice of any of those would be a persona poem, or writing in the voice of a persona. Okay, let's talk about details before we get into it. So this is one of my favorite quotes from a writer named Lorraine Hansberry. And I always bring this quote up to people who are starting to write for the first time, because I think a lot of times when you're beginning to write, you might think, I shouldn't be too specific because people might not understand what I'm talking about. But the truth is, in order to create something universal, you must pay very great attention to the specific. And let me give you an example. We will look at a poem. This poem is by one of my favorite poets of all time. I started reading this poet maybe when I was in middle school, and her name is Sandra Cisneros, and she is a poet and a writer. You might have heard of one of her most famous books called The House on Mango Street, which is not a poetry book, but the way that she writes is so poetic. You can tell that she's a poet by the way she writes it. So this poem is called Cloud, and it has a little epigraph, which is often a quotation that comes before the poem starts to kind of inform the poem a little bit and give you a little more information about it. So the epigraph says, if you are a poet, you will see clearly that there is a cloud floating in this sheet of paper. And here is Sandra Cisneros' poem, Cloud. Before you became a cloud, you were an ocean, roiled and murmuring like a mouth. You were the shadow of a cloud crossing over a field of tulips. You were the tears of a man who cried into a plaid handkerchief. You were a sky without a hat, your heart puffed and flowered like sheets drying on a line. And when you were a tree, you listened to trees and the tree things trees told you. You were the wind in the wheels of a red bicycle. You were the spidery Maria tattooed on the hairless arm of a boy in downtown Houston. You were the rain rolling off the waxy leaves of a magnolia tree, a lock of straw-colored hair wedged between the mottled pages of a Victor Hugo novel, a crescent of soap, a spider the color of a fingernail, the black nets beneath the sea of olive trees, a skein of blue wool, a tea saucer wrapped in newspaper, an empty cracker tin, a bowl of blueberries in heavy cream, white wine in a green-stemmed glass. So, listening to that poem and reading along, you can see there are so many particulars. There are so many specific, concrete details in this that make it very vivid, right? So let's look at some of them. This poet uses a lot of metaphor. So she says, you became a cloud, you were an ocean, roiled and murmuring like a mouth. She's not literally saying that the you is a cloud or an ocean, but it's a figurative way of making a comparison, of applying those qualities to the person, right? There are so many specifics here that can kind of bring a specific image into your head, something very vivid, something that you can imagine how it looks. You might be able to imagine what it smells like or what it tastes like, right? So you were the tears of a man who cried into a plaid handkerchief. That image, you can kind of visualize what it looks like for a man to cry into a handkerchief, and not just a handkerchief, she says, a plaid handkerchief. It's so specific. You were a sky without a hat. I love that one. The sky obviously doesn't wear a hat, right? But to think about what the sky is like without a hat, it's like it's missing something. Your heart puffed and flowered like sheets drying on a line. So you can kind of imagine the image of sheets hanging from a clothing line and billowing and becoming full of air and puffing up, puffed and flowered. And that's how she's comparing the heart, your heart puffed like and flowered like sheets drying on a line. And when you were a tree, you listened to trees and the tree things trees told you. So you can kind of imagine maybe trees have their own language. They listen to each other. They say tree things to each other that we as humans can't even imagine what kind of tree things that they might say. You are the wind in the wheels of a red bicycle. So you can imagine the wind, what it feels like on your skin, the way that it might blow through the wheels of a bicycle, and not just any bicycle, but a red bicycle. You were the spidery Maria tattooed on a hairless arm of a boy in downtown Houston. So you can imagine the script, spidery, makes it, you think about a spider's legs, how they're spindly and kind of sharp, or even a spider's web. And it kind of describes the way the text might look. On a hairless arm of a boy in downtown Houston, so specific. You can imagine in your head what a boy without any hair on his arm in downtown Houston might look like. And that boy might look different to you than it might be imagined in your best friend's head or somebody sitting next to you. You might all picture it a little bit differently. So you can see in this poem, there are so many beautiful details, beautiful particulars that make this poem come to life and make it very vivid. And I would say that you should always aim to be really specific and put these concrete, luminous details in your poetry, in your writing. Okay, so let's talk for a second about persona poems. We're going to look at an example of a persona poem. So I said before that a persona poem is written in the voice of someone who is not the poet. So we can see here this poem by Robert Graves called The Caterpillar. Under this loop of honeysuckle, a creeping colored caterpillar. I gnaw the fresh green hawthorn spray. I nibble it leaf by leaf away. Down beneath grow dandelions, daisies, old man's looking glasses. Rooks flap croaking across the lane. I eat and swallow and eat again. Here come raindrops, helter-skelter. I munch and nibble, unregarding. Hawthorn leaves are juicy and firm. I'll mind my business. I'm a good worm. When I'm old, tired, melancholy, I'll build a leaf-green mausoleum close by, here on this lovely spray, and die and dream the ages away. Some say worms win resurrection with white wings beating flitter flutter. But wings or a sound sleep, why should I care? Either way, I'll miss my share. Under this loop of honeysuckle, a hungry, hairy caterpillar, I crawl on my high and swinging seat and eat, 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 as one ought to eat. So this poem is in the voice of the caterpillar. The caterpillar looks around and sees dandelions and daisies and an old man's looking glasses. So someone has clearly dropped their glasses on the ground and it becomes part of the garden. Raindrops are dropping, and this caterpillar is just concerned with eating and eating and eating because that's what caterpillars do. So I think that this poem is a really good example of getting into the head, the mind of a creature that is unlike you, and imagining what it is that they see, what it is that they experience, what it is that they think or that they imagine, or what's most important to them. And we know that caterpillars wrap themselves in cocoons and they don't die. They become butterflies, right? But from the perspective of this caterpillar, he doesn't know that. So he assumes that his life of eating and being a caterpillar is going to be over. Some say worms win resurrection with white wings beating flitter, flutter. But wings are a sound sleep. Why should I care? Either way, I'll miss my share. So this caterpillar is saying, I don't care if I'm actually going to wake up from this cocoon and become a beautiful butterfly. I'm going to miss being a caterpillar and I'm going to miss eating, right? So I think this is a really good example to think about getting into the mind of a creature that's unlike you. So let's look at a little writing prompt. Write your own persona poem. So what I want you all to do is to write a little bit. So get some paper and pen ready, something to write or type on. And one of the prompts is self-portrait as an animal. And I want you to choose an animal that interests you or that you identify with in some way. And imagine yourself as that animal, just like the caterpillar poem. And I want you to answer these questions. What do you sound like? Describe your favorite feature. What color is it? What does it kind of look like? Compare it to something. What are you scared of? And what do you love? And what is a surprising secret you have? So you might want to pause this video so that you can have a look at these questions as you're writing. And once you come up with the idea of which animal you would like to be, then start to answer these questions in the voice of that animal. The next writing prompt that I have for you for a persona poem, or an alternate option if you don't want to write in the voice of an animal, is self-portrait as an inanimate object. So an inanimate object is anything that is not alive, okay? Something that does not move. Make a list of 5 objects that you touch at least once a week. For example, your bath towel, your toothbrush, your TV remote. So go ahead and start and just make a little list, 5 things that you touch at least once a week that are inanimate, that are not living things. Things. And after you've made that list, I want you to choose the one you like the most. And once you've chosen that object, I want you to consider the object's day, its feelings, its dreams. What does that object experience and see during the day? What might it think if it were alive? What does it want? What does it dream about? What does it wish it could be or have or do? And what would you say and think if you were that object? So I'm going to give you all a few minutes to write. You can choose one or the other, or you can do both, but this is your persona poem prompt.